Hi, I'm Stuart from the Norfolk Honey Company and welcome to another Beekeeping Basics. So tomorrow I'm popping out to check up on some bees and to take some samples, and I thought it would be an opportune moment just to show you how I would feed them in an emergency through the winter with some baker's fondant. We use this because we can get it onto the bees very quickly. It's very pliable, it's easy to use, and it's readily available locally, so I can get it within 24 hours notice and have it on the bees very quickly. So we'll just have a look at the table here. I'm going to try and cut it here in the office to save taking all the equipment down to the kitchen, and we're just going to cut it into some blocks, wrap it in cling film, and then we'll take it out to the bees tomorrow. One of the things that I'm going to do is to place an eek on one of the beehives. An eek is a very narrow piece of wood that sits above the brood nest, and it allows you to place items within it underneath the crownboard. So you raise the crownboard, place the eek onto the brood box, and then put the roof back on top. Most of the time the weather's not so cold that we can't get away with just placing the fondant above the feed holes, and the bees will come up as the weather warms up and take the fondant through the feed holes. But sometimes you need to place the fondant directly above the bees on the frames, and so then in that instance you would use an eek. So we're just going to cut some of this fondant up into blocks, and then tomorrow we'll go out and we'll show you how we feed the bees. So what we've got here is a 12.5 kilo block of fondant, and we're just going to cut this open and then we'll show you what's inside. So we're going to cut this into approximately 12 1 kilo blocks. And again we're using our trusty bread knife. And then once we've cut the blocks out, we're going to wrap them in some cling film. And there we have one block ready to go onto the bees. So I'm just going to carry on cutting this, and we'll catch up again in a moment. Another option, rather than using the cling film, is that you could use takeaway containers. Here in the UK, these plastic recyclable takeaway containers are excellent for using on beehives. It keeps the fondant from drying out, and 1 kilo will fit into one of these tubs nicely, and that can go onto the bees upside down and they can get to it really easily. So this is the last block, and what we're going to do is allow it to warm up. The entire block was kept outside in the cold, so it was quite solid, and as this warms up it will gradually spread out and we can flatten it down into a larger area, and then when we put it onto the beehive using the eek, it'll sit nicely on top of the frames and cover more of the bees. So that's all of the fondant cut, and tomorrow we'll pop out to one of the apiaries and show you how we put these onto the beehives. Okay, so we've come down to one of the apiaries, and following on from yesterday's chopping up of the fondant, we've got blocks of about 1 kilo, and the one section that I allowed to flatten out after it had warmed up, which we're going to put onto the brood frames using an eek, has squashed down quite nicely. So we've got an eek, or a riser. It's a spacer that sits on top of the brood box, and then the fondant will fit inside, and that just gives enough room beneath the crownboard, which will sit on top of this, but we'll show you that when we get into one of the hives. We're also going to take some samples of bees from each of the colonies here to do a test for acarin and nosema, and if you've been watching the microscopy videos, you'll know that we've just created pins and poly mounting blocks for those, and so we're going to take some samples from this apiary today. We can take the samples in a couple of ways, and we'll put together a quick video just to show you how we gather sufficient bees for those tests. So let's go over to the colonies and we'll start opening them up and putting the fondant on. Okay, so we've opened up this nuke. I've not taken the crownboard off, but there's plenty of bees in here, so they're going to need some food. And what we'll do is we just take the block, pull a hole into the bottom of it so that the bees can get to the fondant, and then we gently pop it down on top of the feed hole on top of the crownboard. The bees that are still coming out, we can just brush them off. They'll go back into the entrance, and then we just tidy it up and pop the roof back on. What we've got in front of us is a nuke that went into a full-size hive. They had some food, but we're going to put the fondant on using the eek with this particular colony, and it's simply a case of taking the crownboard off the hive, placing the eek onto the brood box, then you put the fondant directly on top of the brood frames, and then the crownboard goes back on top of the eek, and then the roof on top of that. We've just taken a sample of bees from here to check for nosema and acarin, so they're a little bit lively. So we're going to do this fairly quickly, but we'll video it and show you how the whole process works. It's very straightforward and will take just a matter of seconds. All the bees are on this side of the hive, so we're just going to score through the bottom of the plastic so that we can expose the food for them, and then we're going to gently just place it on top of frames, and now the bees are in direct contact with the fondant. And you can see if we were to put the crownboard straight on top of this, we'd end up crushing bees, and the bees beneath this would also get crushed, and it would make for a pretty disastrous move really, and that's why we use the eek to go on top of the brood box. So the eek sits on top like that, and then we pop the crownboard back on top of the eek. Remembering to pick up the hive identifier so that we can update our records, and then the roof goes back on top. So that's yesterday's video complete. I hope you found that interesting. It's a very straightforward process feeding your bees, and something at this time of the year that everybody should just check up on to make sure that their bees are not starving. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to hit the like button and leave plenty of comments down below. There are lots of different ways of feeding your bees, and we find this one the most effective, and again there's lots of different products out there that you can use to feed your bees. We're going to be feeding some pollen substitute in the not too distant future, so look out for that video, and we'll catch up soon. Thanks for watching.